Welcome to one of the last remaining ferry connections between Europe and Africa, and probably the slowest. Today I'm travelling solo from Italy to Tunisia by spending almost the next 30 hours on board this boat. I've never been to Africa before, and arriving properly across the Mediterranean Sea seems like a much more interesting way to go for the first time than just flying. It's going to be a long journey, more than an entire day on the boat, but surviving that is all part of the fun for me because, well, I enjoy long, weird journeys like this. But why would any normal person make this crossing instead of flying? What's it like on the ship? And how much does it cost to go intercontinental across the high seas? All of those questions we'll answer in this video, as long as I actually make it on board. Spoiler alert, I'm in first class today. I treated myself and sprang for a private room. How often do you get to visit a new continent, eh? The costs of the different types of accommodations and whether it was worth it we'll get into later, because right now, I'm almost late for checking in. How do I get myself in these situations? I just about had time for a quick run around a nearby supermarket, where I decided that plain wraps and sparkling water would keep me alive for the rest of the weekend. And I made my way through security at the harbour, assuming this would all be straightforward. I should know by now not to make such assumptions. Wow. Why must I always be like this? So far I've got through 2 checkpoints. Looks like some other people are late as well. What I mean by late at this point is that I've shown up 1 full hour before check-in closes. So with 15 minutes spent at security, I now have 45 minutes in which to step onto a boat, which you might assume that I could handle. But unfortunately for me, the boarding process here in the port of Genoa is set up to be easy and safe for foot passengers, in much the same way that the human body is set up to live underwater. And I spent the next half an hour walking around under the hot Italian sun, being yelled at by security guards to go to one place, then getting yelled at by the people there that I had to be somewhere else instead. I'm so missing this. It's unbelievable. There's just no information anywhere. I keep getting passed around. My 4th lap of the entire car park of the world, but all in the name of adventure and going somewhere new. But in the end, good things come to those who go on insane wild goose chases, almost getting run over by lorry drivers while looking for them. And just in time, I had had my papers checked, and I was on, and in good spirits. Oh my god. Okay, that was more of a struggle than it needed to be. Partly my fault. First stop, go to collect my room key and check out my quarters for the night. And then, next stop, a new continent for me. As will be driven home when we see some of the cheaper accommodation options later, having a private room like this was such a luxury, especially compared to other journeys that I'd done. And the best part was obviously being on the exterior of the ship and having this window. For as long as we were in port, I even had a view from my room of the magnificent lighthouse that they have here in Genoa. Whether or not, by the way, I could have easily arrived for this intercontinental ferry service more than 1 hour before check-in closed, but didn't because I spent the morning visiting that lighthouse. Well, I mean, who's to say? There's no evidence one way or the other, so I guess it remains one of those mysteries that science can't answer. Wow, okay, this will do nicely. 2 beds, I didn't expect that. I think it's going to turn out to be worth having a private room, and even better, my own bathroom. First thing before I go and look around the rest of the ship and start the whole journey is I'm going to use the shower straight away. I just walked like 50 laps of that car park being told by different people to go and check in at different places. Yeah, partly just bad information out there and loads of different people telling me different stuff. Partly my fault because I was late and stressed and rushing, but I just need to calm down for a second and shower off all of that sweat and stress, and then I'll be excited for this adventure again. But that adventure was actually already starting. I heard the captain's announcement that we were pulling away and rushed to find the nearest outdoor deck so I could join everyone in waving goodbye to the Italian coast as we sailed off into what was, for me, the unknown. Little did I know that the bay here in northern Italy would be some of the last calm seas we'd be treated to for the rest of the 1,000 kilometers we'd be traveling. Okay, I've caught my breath, showered, shaved, feel like a brand new person. I can confirm that the shower does work, by the way, very nice. And we're away on our journey through the Mediterranean. A journey whose almost 30-hour timer has just started. And I began to wonder, how am I going to pass that time? And what's waiting for me on the other side? First things first though, I wanted to look around the ship. This boat is called the GNV Fantastic, and I definitely wanted to see if it deserved that name. Not a lot of other people about at this point, but maybe they were just in this cafeteria, which I resolved to try out for breakfast the next morning. On the same floor, I also found this big duty-free and souvenir store, which was actually a real lifesaver for me on this trip because I somehow forgot to pack my stainless steel pan set. The next place that I found inside the ship was this bar, where I enjoyed a cold Heineken while joining some of the locals in watching Inter Milan under-19s absolutely manhandle Bologna under-19s for some reason. Please don't forget, by the way, to subscribe if you're interested in my solo trip to Tunisia and want to keep up with all of the scrapes that I ended up getting myself into in that country. Well, we're definitely hitting our first patch of rough seas because on my walk back to the room, I was being flung from one side of the corridor to the other. I felt a little bit like I might end up in that scene in Inception where they're trying to walk on the ceiling. Actually, I don't know if you can tell in this room, but I can't sit still right now. Yeah, we're actually really rocking. I wish this was happening in daylight and I could show you outside how much we're swaying around. Well, it's either that, it's either Poseidon inflicting his wrath on us, or there was something in that Heineken. And I think at this point I still have 20 hours, maybe 21, 22 hours left to go, so I'm gonna go to sleep. We'll see how easy that is with the with the world moving around me. And we'll look around at more of the rest of the ship tomorrow and try and pass the time. I'm so much looking forward to seeing this new country, and I'll see you in the morning. Also, I just realised when I was stood up that I should have said the wrath of Neptune, not Poseidon, because we're in Roman Empire territory, but I've already blown that now. Just forgive me. Good morning, and what a good morning it is. Not only am I on the way to Africa, I've just had the most calming and peaceful wake-up moment watching the sunrise over Corsica and Sardinia and over this amazing open view of the Mediterranean. It was so worth paying for a room with a window. There's something about that first view of the sea in the morning, just its size and its beauty, and at least now how still and calm and tranquil it is. It's mesmerizing. Last night, however, it was not calm and still and tranquil, and it actually took me a long time to get to sleep. The fact that we were rocking backwards and forwards isn't so bad when you're laying down, but the worst part about it was just the noise. Everything, all the furniture and all the cabins were just creaking, swaying to and fro. It sounded a bit like they were going to fall apart at times. And sometimes when there was a particularly bad wave, we would, you could hear the side of the ship kind of crashing into it and the waves bashing up against the side of the ship. I wish that would have happened during daylight and I could have seen it, because yeah, it sounded pretty violent and it kept me awake for a while and woke me up a few times. But at least this morning, I've slept for a little while. The beds are pretty comfy. I'm happy to have 2 beds. Only complaints so far with the room. I mean, it does have a lot of useful stuff, like the plugs are working so I can charge everything. There's a reading light. Obviously having an ensuite is like a massive luxury, and the shower was good. There's a wardrobe to hide away and store your bags and coat. All of that is good. Just there's no soap in the bathroom. I don't know why they provide a bathroom and a sink without providing soap for it. Thankfully I have this hand gel, so that's kind of like a half substitute for it. But for all the money I paid, a little bit of soap in the bathroom would have gone a long way. I'm actually still kind of distracted sitting here just looking out at the sea. There's something kind of primal about it when you're out in the middle of the and it just stretches on forever. Yeah, it's captivating in a weird, primal way, I guess. But I'm gonna take a look around the rest of the ship, see where I can find myself a morning coffee, and see how I can pass the rest of the day. There's not a whole lot of information on board, but I do know that we still have about 10-11 hours until we reach Tunis. I wish there was a map or a timer somewhere. Maybe I'll find it if I walk around some of the other decks. So my room is here on deck 7, but it does seem like there's a lot of things on the other decks. My trip to go and see the other decks that I hadn't been to yet took me on more of these shiny staircases, past some more interesting artwork and cases full of souvenirs for sale, but I did also eventually find a map of the journey. 90s looking as it was, it meant that we were about 3/4 of the way to Tunisia. I was 3/4 of the way across the Mediterranean on this, one of the last ways to get from Europe to Africa without flying. A journey that I'd read about online and always wanted to try out. Even if they're not technically actually fun, I love journeys like this that make you appreciate how far you're going through adding some kind of physicality to it. Rather than go to the airport and get teleported to any arbitrary location, we had all chosen to spend our weekend standing around on this great hunk of metal, getting bashed around by the waves, hoping to eventually step off on another continent. It was actually much too rough to feel safe standing outside and thinking wistful thoughts like this, so I made my way back in to go to that cafeteria that I'd seen last night. Not a great selection if you don't eat meat, but that's okay. I knew I was going out on a limb by making this trip at all, and I picked up 2 of these rolls, some pineapple, an espresso and a water for €8. Not too bad, considering the particularly limited choice that you have out in the middle of the ocean. Delicious, but my teeth are not thanking me for this. Watching people, including me, try and walk around the ship when it's like this is just free entertainment. It's no surprise half the boat is made of handrails. To kill some more of the time on board, I went to see if there was another spot to enjoy second coffee, which I was happy to find in the form of this cafe, which seemed to be very popular with the other passengers and had this weird disused pool at the centre of its seating area. Thankfully though, I was able to get a window seat and get lost in my thoughts for a while longer. As well as the usual routine of marvelling at the great power and indifference of the water, I was also considering the fact that I had no idea what lay ahead of me tonight when we arrived. I was really looking forward to my first time in Tunisia, and I, of course, had a very ambitious itinerary for my time there, including trying to travel across the entire country by train, and I was getting a bit nervous to be doing this particular mad solo trip without being able to speak any Arabic. Thankfully, on this boat, you have nothing but time, and nothing better to do with it than try to make a start with at least learning a couple of phrases. As-salam, labas, labas. Shukran. Shukran. Am I saying any of these right? Presumably not, but I'm going to try and memorize some of them. Labes? Labes. We've still got a few hours to go. It's definitely a journey that is, I would say, suitably long, to build suspense for the big finale when we arrive in Tunis, the capital of Tunisia, on its northern Mediterranean coast. And anticipation is definitely building on board, at least for me. Today I get to say something that I'll probably never get to say again, because obviously today I'm making my first visit to a new continent, and I guess I'm running out. And I was just thinking about this in the shower, so obviously by being born in England, I had always been to Europe, but my first visit to non-English Europe was as a kid, taking the ferry with my mum to the north of France, to Calais. Singapore was my first place in Asia, then Perth. North America, my first visit was New York City, and South America, Bogota, Colombia. And today, Tunisia, rounds off all but one continent. I'd say that's an interesting mix of places. I'm very fortunate to have been able to experience all of those things. Obviously, continents are mostly made up, and there's loads of cultural differences even within one continent. But it just got me thinking, because today, it's probably my last chance to go to a new one. I think if I ever get to add Antarctica to the list, that would be amazing, but it would mean that my financial situation has changed a lot, and I'd also have to get used to boats shaking around, because the Drake Passage and the Drake Shake is very famous and going to be much worse than I've experienced on this boat. And just as I've said that, land ho. Can you see that? Probably not. I'll wait till we get closer, but I definitely better get packing. And narration Tom can explain to you the cost for doing this trip. Thank you, real life Tom. Prices to do this trip from Genoa to Tunis vary significantly, but as a rough guide, you can do it as a foot passenger in a private room like mine for about €250, in a shared sleeping room for €150, and with no bed, just access to a seat to spend the night in for €100. On one of my tours of the ship, I did actually stumble across the room full of seats that the ferry company GNV describe as offering maximum comfort. I'm not sure it would have been that much fun to spend the night in there, but then again, I've definitely done worse. Travelling with a dog is also only an extra 30 euros on this ferry and is presumably easier than taking them on a plane. Taking a vehicle with you adds about 200 euros to all of those prices and is probably also easier than trying to take it on a plane. The amount of lorries, motorcyclists, or even just people with a carload of luggage that need to make this crossing is, of course, what keeps it alive. I'm sure a lot of the passengers drive this route as a matter of routine for their jobs. And then you have weird English people with YouTube channels. Given that any normal foot passenger would just fly, I can actually understand why staff in the ports have no idea what to do when somebody rocks up with a 30-litre backpack instead of a 2-ton camper van. If I'd have flown a similar route, I could have made it to Tunis in under 2 hours for less than 100 euros. But where's the fun in that? All packed up by now, I headed out to watch our approach towards land and to breathe in some of that glorious sunshine, with all of these thoughts still swirling around my head. You can connect any 2 dots on the map with a plane and then probably forget that you ever made the journey, but this is one that I'll probably be telling people about for years. So I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I paid more for, frankly, a worse experience, but one that makes an actual story. I can't really explain why, but I assume that if you're watching this video, you're also the type of person that understands. One thing I'm really glad that I did on this trip was to download a Tunisian eSIM card to my phone before leaving home. And I was actually already able to activate it at this point before we'd even got that close to land, meaning that I'd be arriving in Tunis with mobile data already working, which was a massive game changer. I've bought them from the company Aerolo in a few countries now and always had really good experiences, so I'm very happy to say that if you also want good value eSIMs, you can get them at the link in the description, while supporting this channel at the same time. Having an internet connection ahead of time did genuinely save me when trying to get through Tunisian immigration, but that's a story for another time, so again, subscribe if you don't want to miss that. It was actually a really nice atmosphere out on this deck, with everybody knowing that we'd finally made it, and as the sun began to set behind the Atlas Mountains and I looked out over the rooftops of distant mosques, it began to sink in that I'd had a once-in-a-lifetime experience here.
Wow, what a sight to ride to!
I couldn't believe that I'd made it from my flat back home in Leipzig to the North African coast without having been to an airport. Probably not an experience I'd repeat, but definitely one for the grandkids. Taking my first steps on African soil, thinking about all of the Tunisian adventures that still lay ahead of me, and thinking, wow, that absolute unit of a boat brought me here.